Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Sam Aarons. She has been a dynamic figure in the field of mergers and acquisitions with over 50 under her belt. She's been a temporary and fractional COO for a number of organizations. She loves to serve, and she's also dove into the inner side of life, which is what our conversation is going to start with in this apocalyptic chat, uncovering some knowledge that you may not have had yet. So stick with us. We'll be right back. Sam, it is so great to have you here. That I've been really looking forward to this conversation, and I really appreciate your time and your energy. And thank you for being here.
Then it's a pleasure. Every time we have a chance to interact, I feel like not only do I learn something about the broader world and about you, but I kind of learned something about myself too. And that makes it really enjoyable on a lot of levels.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful to learn about each other, self, other, what we can find in common and how we can grow from there. Speaking of how we can grow, we talk about on One World and a New World, we talk about the bridge between the inner and the outer realities and the experiences that we have when we're younger that we don't talk about to others that are full of this interconnectedness that sometimes we recognize when we're younger. Sometimes we look back when we're older and recognize, oh, yeah, I remember that. So these are important things, especially in our burgeoning society and learning how to get along with each other, working through all the trauma, the difficulties, and most of it is from the lack of self-love, which is part of why we don't talk to others because about the weird, crazy, insane stuff that, or at least we perceive they'll see us as that, and often do, because there's no direct experience. And many people who have had profound experiences, when they talk about them, they're kind of not really heard because there's no direct experience from the other person that can actually hear what that person is saying from that place. So this is what we try to do with the show, is be able to talk about these things and create generative conversations about them, exploring them, and then how this understanding interconnectivity applies to professional lives and the workplace and getting people, places, and things to work together better, hopefully. So thank you for taking this time and having the energy to go into this. What was it like for you, and how did you begin to understand that there was more to life than the cursory, material world?
It's such a complex question, really. I'm going
Do
to
I
answer
ask
it. I
simple
think,
questions?
no, no, never. I'm going to answer
Hopefully
it
sometime I will.
in a couple of ways, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
First, I was raised by a parent who sustained a terrible injury when I was a child and became profoundly disabled.
Mm,
And one of the things that taught me was how we look at each other, because I went from having a regular parent to having a special parent, and it changed just the way people interact with each other. And the thing is, this my mom is brilliant. She was an entrepreneur. She helped start charitable organizations. She single-handedly has done some pretty incredible things in the animal rescue and in the domestic violence arenas because she believes in it. So it never held her back once. Yet every time that somebody looked at her, if they couldn't fight through what they saw, then they immediately discounted her. And so I learned from a really young age that if you just look at what's right in front of you, you miss out on so much. So sometimes you really have to sit with it and see
sure.
what emerges. And
Right.
to this day, I have friends from my young childhood, and we are long past that, that keep in touch with my mom because she was this profound influence who, because of her experience as a human, she taught every person around her to see more, be more, and acknowledge the fact that there is more.
Sure, sure. And the paradox, it seems, in that kind of situation too, and I totally agree with you, we're too cursory in our view. And yet, even just the looking, being aware of what's right in front of you, rather than looking at the horizon to some unknown thing that you're trying to strive for or achieve, the breadcrumbs to getting to that usually show up right in front of you, and you don't always see them because you're not looking from that perspective.
So clearly, we didn't tee this up. I feel like we should tell your viewers we didn't tee this
All
up
right, let's tee it
because I
up.
said I wanted to answer this two ways, right?
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
first was the first part, and the second was in presence. Um, I, and again, we didn't tee this up. We haven't had this conversation before. I think that for me, one of the things that I have always learned is that everything that happens to us, both the incredible good things and the not so great things, is all about getting us to who we're supposed to be and where we're supposed to be. And
Hmm.
the key in all of that is being present in where you are, because then we are amazing intuitive people. As creatures, we discount our intuition so often, and yet so often it's right in friends, in romantic relationships, in safety situations, and even in business.
Now, why do
And
you think? I totally agree with you, and this is the whole point of the show. We've got this inner awareness, this intuitive nature that we have. All of us do. And yet, when we start voicing those things right away, it becomes contentious with
absolutely.
others. How did you find the way through that? What were some of the key things that you found that allowed you to be expressive, to share those inner thoughts and feelings and things without the contentiousness?
Honestly, it's a challenge. Okay. I'm a little bit of a people pleaser if I allow myself to go down that avenue. And so the people pleasing part of myself wants me to give you my spreadsheet with these 25 things and these 4 columns across that show you the reasons why we should do something.
Right. Well, that's
However,
project manager, right? That this
yeah,
is how
absolutely.
we do
Yeah,
this.
that's
Right.
operations 101, right?
Exactly.
However, as I have gotten older, something that I have learned is that oftentimes if I have to work that hard to sway you, like the colloquial you,
Hmm.
um, to what I felt from the very beginning, I might not get you there anyway. So I might as well lean into what I feel from the beginning and then figure out ways to partner with you, to truly collaborate
Hmm.
at a deeper level. Because then, if I need the spreadsheets and the justification, we can work together on them. And so it becomes kind of this power of the we versus just the bulldozing of the me.
The I and we. That's why I use the pronouns, right? Because
Absolutely.
the I is just how we approach it. However, it really doesn't matter without the we. And even the we, there's many aspects of self that become that we too.
Well, we're all connected,
Not
right?
that we're MPD, but multiple personality disorder. We're
Yes.
not
No,
that.
but
And yet, there's many masks and things and the stuff that we weed through in our own growth and awareness of self and realizing that we don't necessarily need to have those masks.
one of the least connected people that I have ever met in my entire career said one of the most profound things to me. And we were talking about doing this massive change project and trying to really move the dial, not just from here to here, but from here
Hmm.
to here in a very short period of time with a lot of very resistant people. And he was struggling with just doing the mandate, thou shall, which he had the power to do, but he really loved his company and he wanted people to move for the right reasons so they would stay, which means he also valued the people, right?
Right.
And he said, I struggle every day with not believing that we're connected. And I said, well, I think we are. And he said, I think at my gut, I probably do believe that we are, that every time you breathe out, I breathe in. And there is this constant exchange, always, with everyone and the whole world.
Hmm.
He said, but I guess I don't want to believe that because that means I can't fix things by myself.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
the DIY, right? And so we're dying to do things ourselves, and yet we don't have enough self-love and love of others to incorporate that collaboration to the extent that it can be. How does that, when he, did he get beyond that? That were there some things that were made available to him that allowed him to experience that connection a little more through his willingness, first of all, and the curiosity of finding it?
Absolutely. I mean, some of it really came down to it wasn't a negotiable to get the employees where they needed to go. This business
Mhm.
wasn't going to survive. And he believed it. And I think sometimes we get to a point where we'll take a leap of faith because we know that if we don't, then whatever it, it is apocalyptic without it. So the
Right.
hope is if we take the leap of faith that it's not. And
Well,
so
okay, you
because,
used the word there. I'm gonna bring this out for just a minute. You said
sure,
apocalyptic. What do you mean by that?
well,
Because
for
that
them, it would have
the word,
been the end of the business. Like his
okay.
entire
So
existence had been poured into this.
if you may, could
Yeah.
I offer something? Apocalypse means the uncovering of knowledge. Doesn't mean destruction. Now,
Well,
the word comes, I mean, the Greek word actually
absolutely.
means uncovering knowledge. So,
And
from an apocalypse, this is why I call it apocalyptic chats. And
yeah,
this is what we're
absolutely.
doing right here, right now,
Yes.
right? This is one of those moments where in that uncover, because the uncovering of knowledge is that, oh, in this condition or in this place, really can't go that direction, right? If we go that direction, then we're going to fail. So
Mhm.
this is an awareness. It's the uncovering of the knowledge that, okay, we know we have this gut feeling if we go this direction, it's not going to work. So then what? So there's this other intuitive nudge that's saying, well,
Absolutely.
here's a possibility, and it's uncomfortable, it's unknown, and yet we know if we go this way, things aren't going to happen right. So let's give this an opportunity just to be present and have a moment where we're opening and we're questioning and we come closer in our own collective curiosity to manifest the change that's necessary for the business to grow and to remain whole. And that's a tough, especially a servant leader, right?
Oh,
Where the
absolutely.
employees, the staff, you're there to serve them. You're not there to direct and rule.
Well,
So
and
how did
I think
he incorporate that kind of aspect of
we
leadership?
we worked really hard on the concept that a failure culture can actually be a really good thing. Okay.
Hmm.
The reality is, I don't disagree with you on the word apocalyptic. And here's why. I think you either win or you learn, period.
Right.
Well, he had really gotten wise enough in trusting his advisors and in his experience to recognize the fact that there were some paths that if they went down, the learning would come at too expensive of a price.
Mm.
And so it was really helpful because then he was willing to lean in on some faith. Where can we go? And as we peel the onion and we leave layers behind us, what's at the root that can get this business through to where it needs to go? And what's the most likely best outcome?
Sure.
And how do we get there? And that took not just, all the normal planning, lots of spreadsheets, right? Lots of spreadsheets, lots of PowerPoint, but
Spreadsheets, scheduling, many
absolutely.
meetings and all that kind of stuff. I've been there, done that, understand it, and how does that then open the door? You mentioned the failure culture. We are so steeped in this idea of mistakes, of failures, of all the things that are self-deprecating, and we spend probably 50,000 of the 70,000 thoughts a day we have in self-deprecating diatribes, right? So how do we instill this? It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. You're not gonna succeed at anything if you don't have some bumps in the road because you're attempting something new. How do we, how do you feel that
So
that is brought
let's
more to
talk
the
about this
surface?
particular business owner and then broaden it out. Okay.
Sure. Yeah,
So for this guy, part of what it came down to is identifying the mountains most likely to be scaled. I didn't come up with that phrase, but I really like it, right? We
sure.
know that there are hard things to do here, and we can plan and we can spreadsheet and we can schedule and we can budget. But the reality is at some point we have to dig deep and we have to figure out how do we motivate the people? How do we motivate ourselves? And how do we recover as it's hard? And at
Mhm.
each step of the way, he had great advisors that helped do some of that. But of those of us that were part of that advisory team, I am great. I'm very grateful. He allowed us to also filter through the business and find the people that really could be the change agents who already got it, who could see how to climb the next mountain. Because again, right back to the
Yeah.
we, so
Attitudes. You
often,
can train skill sets.
absolutely. Absolutely, they got it. And so if we can grab this incredible AR clerk who already sees how you can fix so many things, and we can pull her along to the next mountain, and she can be the road captain at that mountain, then by the
Mhm.
time we all get there, we're ready to move there. And every attitude along the way starts to reposition. And so suddenly we started out here, and we know we have to end up here, but we cannot go from here to here with 1,000 people in one fell swoop. We will lose too many of them. But by having each one of the mountains headed by somebody who got it, we can move in these little incremental amounts
Sure.
so that
And it
this
ripples through
absolutely,
and eventually becomes a wave with the momentum as that connective tissue builds in those core members that are leading that change because there's an
absolutely.
experience of camaraderie that happens with it, right? That you're there for each other. Whereas in the past, and I had this experience in corporate world in my 20s, that, it's the ladder climbers, it's the beat people over the head to get what you need done, and the command and control structures that have eventually caused all of the major kerfuffles across the board, be it in organizations, companies, politics, what have you. And we're shifting that now. And I think that you see that you're part of it to some degree. And we didn't really mention the depth I did in the introduction, but the depth of experience you've had with all the different mergers and acquisitions that you've done and been part of those colossal changes. So you speak from experience. This is not theory.
No,
But we
I
took the
see it
local thing.
practice.
So
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, we
kind
did.
of leapt ahead, didn't I?
You absolutely did, because that's where I was going is you see that in this one company, but I have seen it ripple through dozens, probably close to 100 companies through my career in different ways, shapes, and forms. And the reality is that as you get further and further into really being able to come together behind your vision, you do get people who leave because it wasn't the right vision for
Sure.
them. They weren't in the right place. But you also get people who become very committed to the vision. They see that their servant leader is behind them. They have the support that they need to just really excel and grow in their space. And then you get innovation and creation and mastery in your industry.
Absolutely. And the change in, I'll just say the vibe, the attitude, the culture shifts at that point to this sense of working together, that you're all there with purpose, with goals that you're collectively working to achieve, and you're all arm in arm instead of beating each other up trying to get there.
There's little climbing. And the thing about it is, I've been talking a lot lately in some of my writing about flattening out organizations, and
Hmm.
I'm a fan of a fairly flat organization. But I understand in some industries, you really have to have a pretty solid hierarchy. But even in those organizations, when you have this, I'll use your word, vibe, one of the things that happens is you have servant leaders at every level. And
Hmm.
so, in many ways, the organization is as flat as it can possibly be because every employee is empowered to do the things that they can do on behalf of the organization to use their intellect and their intuition
Right.
in unique and creative ways. And so, even in something that can be hierarchical in nature, you have that flat feeling and you have this engine that becomes just constantly moving forward while nobody is left behind. You're not dropping people off at the train stations.
Sure.
You're all on this speeding bullet train that's going in the same direction because you're all fueling it.
Hmm. I had a similar experience, the same company I was talking about in my 20s, aerospace industry. And as a servant leader, didn't even have the name for it then. It's just how I operated. And I, not even realizing it, rose to the top of the production charts. I was in a 35-person production control department for an aerospace manufacturing company. So I was in charge of $7 million in shipments a month, 800 part numbers. I had to go, my job, anywhere in the plant to get it done, talk to anybody that was necessary. And through that all, I just treated people how I would like to be treated, and things got done. And then right next to that were people beating each other up trying to get stuff done and wondering why they might be successful once or twice, but then they started having problems and delays. And when you have scheduling delays in a company that size, that eventually gets to a point where for our military spares, we had $1 million a month progress payment removed because of it. So then they put me on that desk and I got it. It
Sure.
took me about a year, but I got it back under 10%. We were at 28% delinquency. I got it under 10 in less than a year. Same attitude. And it was just how we treat each other. Well, the reason we don't treat each other that way is because we're afraid that we're going to lose something in the process.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. We forget it's all about the people. And so if you're always creating trust and you're always creating alignment, then you're always moving in this positive direction. And it's easy to not get steeped in your fear. But when you're out of alignment or you're not constantly building that trust, then it's easy to slide back into your own fear, which can ripple out
Sure.
to others.
That not believing, right?
Absolutely.
Like
It's loss of faith. Yeah, absolutely. At the root of so many of our negative emotions, personally and professionally, is fear,
mhm,
right? The root of anger is almost always fear. The root of sadness is often fear. The root of frustration is often fear.
right.
So if we can find a way to harness that fear and let it power how we build trust and how we're constantly working to be in alignment, then everyone around us benefits both personally and professionally. And I know I've seen this. I worked on a massive acquisition, and the goal had been for the acquired company to largely just be decimated. We wanted their process and their systems, and if need be, we would do it at the expense of all of their headcount. And I was given 3 days to figure out what to do with slightly less than 1,000 people. And I went into a conference room with one assistant and we put people in piles. Where can we instantly redeploy somewhere into the acquiring company? Where can we show that this person adds so much value in the acquired company that they should be given a period of time to actually reintegrate into the new company? And
Hmm.
then who are the people who, at this point, I couldn't find a place, but given some time, we might be able to. And then the last pile was people that I saw were either at the point where they wanted to go. This was a good opportunity for them to exit, or they weren't a fit in terms of long term. And I did not go into the room believing that most people fit in that fourth pile.
Now, did
And
you find the 20-60-20 rule? You know, we talk about that
no.
as 20% of the people will be the ones who achieve and do things on their own. 20% are the knuckle draggers. And the 60% will behave how you tolerate the lower 20%. Did you
So
find?
to some extent, this was a hostile acquisition, Zen.
Yeah,
So
okay.
a lot of the rules that you would find under normal circumstances don't apply in that situation because you don't have access to them. So a
Sure.
lot of what you're doing is based on assumption. But to this day in my career, 25 years later, I can say that one of the things I am most proud of is I went into that room with 1,000 people losing their jobs, and I came out of that room with almost 900 people having a job.
See,
And
that's
I,
awesome.
I'm proud of that. I really am. Because to me, it was always all about the people. Now, I wasn't a great fit in that company long term because it wasn't always about the people.
Hmm.
But for me, because it was, I could navigate the things that we are talking about right now, all those years ago, and know when we come out of the other side of this, I can look myself in the mirror. And that was really important to me.
Sure. And this was back in the beginnings of the development of emotional interpersonal skills, is what it
Absolutely.
was called then, right? Then
Sure.
it became emotional
Absolutely.
intelligence and servant leadership. Now, in that building of momentum across the board, do you see a healthy growth in that attitude and the displacement of not of people, of the old mentality of profit over people and planet, now changing to more of a people and planet over profit? Doesn't do away with the profit, has to happen. It just frames it differently.
Can I say yes and no? And here's why.
Okay.
As I get older, I gravitate towards working with a certain type of client, right? I work with
Hmm.
the people who get it. I think you've heard me use the analogy of a
And
house.
not everybody does, and
That's
they
right.
don't necessarily have to either.
That's
This is
right.
not a
Absolutely.
prescriptive, it's not a
No.
command and control thing like we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is an invitation.
But because of that, if I have to beat the door of the house down to get an invitation in to work with somebody, they're not a great fit for me. People are
Hmm.
busy. I'll knock a couple of times, but more than that, I recognize the fact they're not a great fit. So I'm not working with a lot of people who don't get this.
Right.
So my perception is probably heavily skewed towards the fact that I'm working with a lot of folks who they absolutely understand we're all in this together. We're connected. Yes, we need to make a profit. The business is still there, but that sometimes you might make a decision for the good of the business that isn't just about stock price.
Absolutely. And when you operate a business in that way, your staff and employees are generally fairly happy with what's going on. And what we don't realize, what hasn't been realized, I think, by the servant leaders and by those who can see the difference in what happens, is that happy people get more done with less supervision and will far exceed your expectations.
Definitely. So I think some of that comes back to an old psychology theory called the halo effect.
Hmm.
Servant leaders themselves often are happier people, right? They have this
Intrinsically,
broader,
yeah.
yeah, they have this broader view, this bigger vision, and this sense of interconnectedness that allows them to find joy and happiness in a lot of different ways. So one misstep isn't the end of the world.
Mm-mm. They look
So
for silver linings in everything too, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And because of that, when they look at their employees, they see the ability to have all of that as well. And so that halo effect, that view that this person can also be all of those things in whatever way they choose, often means that that individual employee rises to that.
Hmm.
And so now you have this beautiful interconnectedness that just reinforces itself, that supports individuals in being individuals, but a business in reaching higher levels than it could have before.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned some tough areas and sometimes, people that just may not make it. What have you found that is most critical, or the invitations that are most accepted in moving that needle from the resistant to embracement or embracing change?
I think what I see a lot is that the person has to have had, it doesn't have to be a catastrophic,
Hmm.
failure learning experience, but it has to have been a significant enough bump in the road that they recognize the fact that there's something humbling in being in charge, right? And
Hmm.
so when we are humbled, we look around for a moment. And this is the one place where I will say, I think fear can be a good motivator, right? So we hit
Okay.
this bump in a road and we go, oh, I can't do this by myself. Well, so that in and unto itself is fear. But what happens after that is all the difference, I believe. And what happens after that with the right types of servant leaders is that they go, I can't do this by myself. I'm not going to get stuck here. And they're scanning for, who do I need to bring in? Who really knows this better than me? Who can support my staff? Who can build my business? Who can help realign us, right? If it's all about alignment, then we hit that bump because we got out of alignment. So who can
Yep.
help realign us? So it's
Yep.
the one place in which I do think fear can be the right motivator, because they sit for a minute. And a good leader, in my opinion, when they get stuck and they have to sit for a minute, gets introspective. And that fear leads them to find a gap, and that gap leads them to reach out. Now, I would love to say that I have the solution for all these leaders, and sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't. And sometimes what it is they need this person for this, and this person for this, and this person for this. And having sat for just a moment, they recognize that. And
Hmm.
so that introspection
They hit the
becomes real.
pause button. I call that the
Abs-
proverbial pause button. And we all need to hit
absolutely.
it from time to time. Just stop and settle. Don't even think. Just have a question. And then just sit and let that percolate. And as you're talking, it seemed as though when they did that, that those things emerge, right?
Absolutely.
What you're looking for, because what we don't realize, and I'll put this out, and that maybe you can reflect on its truth or not for you. What we seek is seeking us
Absolutely. It- It's the
until
other
we
half of your
find it.
pair of pants,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And fear,
absolutely.
I had a Willie Whitefeather was his name, bless his heart, rest in peace. Native American mixed blood storyteller that I met when I was doing my first show back in the 90s. And he said, he introduced the concept of fear being false evidence appearing real. And that what we seek to do is free every anxious reaction. And my response to him was, yeah, most of the time we just want to F everything and run. So, which is true, right? It's because we don't want to be confrontational, first of all, and having what we perceive as could be confrontational or contentious, we don't want to bring that up because it's so uncomfortable. There's an unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. How do you get over that? I don't know. Let's try it anyway.
So I think I have to circle back for a second on something that you
Sure.
just said. I would say that the clients that I work with now, then they fall into two camps. Many of them live in the camp that you just described. However, I also work with that very typical entrepreneur or CXO who has gotten where they are by just going. And so now they're just going to go and they're going to barrel through this thing and it doesn't matter. And so when you talk about the pause and the reflection, I use that a lot. There are a lot of exercises that I'll do with a new client that are geared towards getting somebody to tap back into that intuition, to sit
Hmm.
in silence. I realized in my last consulting services firm, for whatever reason, we worked with a lot of like competitive runners, like long distance Ironman. there's a mentality that goes with that, right? They're used to
Sure.
just run it out. And so we would get these folks to sit in silence for 5 minutes. It would be like having a room full of preschoolers trying to get them to sit. They
Oh
would go
yeah,
bananas,
yeah.
they would fidget,
I
they
was just
couldn't
gonna
do
say,
it.
just imagine trying to get a boardroom to sit in silence, not say a word to each other, and
Or
just
by themselves,
right.
or by themselves.
Oh
Sit
yeah, because
with
you got those thoughts going through your head. You know,
so we would
when I
work
was
on
younger,
that.
the one of the things that occurred to me, and I didn't realize its value until much later in life, when everybody was talking about meditation and all the techniques to get quiet, right? To just to still yourself. When I was a kid, I was orphaned and adopted. I found out I was adopted. I was left with some questions about, the biologicals, things like that. It really didn't matter because I was loved and adored, and that was obvious. I knew that. And yet there was this question of, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them? And not too long after that, a voice appeared. And it startled me one night when it just simply said, "Hey, you," as I had a moment of pause. And I spun around, asked my mother if she heard it. She said no. And I couldn't deny what I heard. And so I thought, and this was a 5-year-old, right? I stood in front of the window at night with lights on in the living room, couldn't see out because the lights were on, and I would project that same voice out, hoping for a return. And of course, as kids, you've got at least the 70,000 thoughts a day, and maybe more because your mind just doesn't shut off. Well, there was a night where it did. For some reason, I just got still for a moment and my thoughts ceased. Guess what happened?
Hmm.
The voice returned. Now, being able to reach that place as a kid and continue
You just cut out.
ages that there's a capacity for being ever present with that, and the point of not needing to go into that silence. You hit the pause button, you have the quick question and reflection that happens almost instantaneously. And it's an amazing experience, but you can't talk to anybody without having, right? That makes you seem kind of weird. And yet that's available to everyone. It's just a discipline that has to be practiced. How
Well,
did
and
you
I think
find
that
instilling that discipline in yourself and others? What are the kind of things that you're able to do with that?
so I guess for me, one of the things that I find is if I really listen to that quiet place, to my intuition, it is very, very rarely wrong. Sometimes my interpretation might be wrong, but it is
Sure.
very rarely wrong. And if I can advise my clients to take a pause, to take a moment, and to make that a habit, then one of the things that they can do is they can find that recentering. We almost always know where we need to go and how we need to get there and what we'll do when we get there. That's not to say that there aren't amazing mysteries in front of us,
But then we
but
pile a whole bunch of stuff of reasons why we can't.
absolutely. And so, one of the things that we have done for years is encourage a meditation practice. And I'm careful when I talk to clients about this because I don't see this as in conflict with their faith. And so we
Mm-mm.
talk about that. And in many ways, I see this as very supportive of their faith because it gives you an even stronger ability to find peace, quiet, and clarity. And your faith will only help guide you better if you have that. And
Mhm.
there are all kinds of things that I recommend that clients do. I've got some great readings that I can share with clients when I find that they're finally ready for this. I've got a couple of great activities. I've got some great music that can help. I find lately I've been working a lot with female entrepreneurs who have been diagnosed with late stage ADHD. And there are all sorts of music pieces that I can give them that can help them set the stage to then find stillness. And when they do that, their outcome is profound because stillness has so not been a part of their lives.
Sure, sure. Now, do you, and that just being able to enter that space can be profound in moments of discovery, right? Oh, I didn't realize I could do that. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't, right? And then you get to the point where there's now this place of awe
Mhm.
that comes because it's so you can cognitively understand it, but you can't define it completely, right? It's just something that happens because you make yourself available to it. Now, in this perspective, you mentioned a moment ago the sometimes they get it, sometimes the perspective's not there, sometimes the perception's not there. In this ability to connect to the infinite source that we all have. And one of the things that I'm aware of and espouse, and we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Now, I say it that way. There's a 20 or 15,000-year-old set of poems called the Vedas that basically say the same thing, that we're all divine threads connected to source, capable of God consciousness. And so what's that mean? Well, to most people, that's an affront to their religion. Well, but in the bottom, in the core bottom of each religion, there's simply to love and be loved. Well, in that space, these things come because you're not attached. There's a fearlessness that comes from that and being able to explore. And once you have that experience a few times, then you begin to trust it, right? You still don't know exactly what's going to happen. However, you know it's going to be something cool that is going to work out and be better than you ever imagined. How do you
Well,
find that instruction being able to be imparted to the people that you work with? Because I get a sense that you're kind of in that way too. And you know that because your own direct experience. How do you share that in not just the personal lives, but in the overall development of a better world? And
I
you're
think
moving
some of it
around.
really
You're
comes
dancing
down.
now. Yeah, that
I
must have made you feel really
I
good.
am. Absolutely. Yes, that was a lot of powerful ideas there. I I guess, Zen, I see a couple of things there. First, what I see is getting someone to navigate through that to find that still place often means that you can help them understand some of their own vulnerabilities and that you yourself don't have to understand them for them. This is all about them, right?
Hmm.
And so you're just their guide, their partner in finding their way through. And when I do that with clients, it's often because they're having kind of this crisis of consciousness and they're stuck. And so I think about it as water, right? And so what we're doing is one stick at a time, we're pulling the dam apart so that the water can then flow again.
Hmm.
And you can see that in them. The second piece of
But you don't
this,
want to take too many sticks out because the flash flood doesn't necessarily work well
it's a
either.
it's a process, right?
Yeah.
It's the reverse of building it. It's one at a time so that there is this acceptance. Because to go back to what you were talking about before with the concept of fear, if you pull the whole dam down and you get that flood, then all you're doing is literally
It's
drowning
overwhelmed.
in that fear. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
if you pull one at a time and at each point you navigate through what that brings up, then what you have is the ability to change the direction of the river and get it flowing where you need it to.
Hmm.
And the bigger, I guess, component of this is when we apply this like in a business sense, I think personally it's got a lot of profound application, but when we apply this in a business sense, part of what we do is, back to schedules and planning, literally have an individual plan with this leader on how we navigate our way through what is
Hmm.
pulling one stick at a time out of the dam, and how, as we deal with the outcome of that, it flows backwards everywhere that it's supposed to.
Sure. Sure. And you make a great point. It's the individual that uniqueness of the individual and the communication, the navigation, the shared love, if you will, between those that goes beyond the constrictions, opens the door to a better relationship, and then, and only then, will it apply to the larger organization, because you can't change a larger organization without first addressing the individuals in it. Would you agree with
Absolutely.
that?
I absolutely, right? Where if we're all connected, then on some level, we all have to be okay, or we can only move at the rate of the person who is the least okay among us.
Hmm.
If you take it out of the business world and put it into interpersonal relationships, they say that a romantic relationship only moves at the rate at which the slowest person falls in love.
Right.
Well, I think you can apply that to a lot of different avenues of life, including business.
Sure.
Because, if we're talking about scaling a business or taking a new product line into the market, we can really only move as fast as the slowest employee who is critical to that process can move,
Hmm.
unless we can help position that person in a way that their own flow can go better. And
And that's in any business, any
absolutely,
company, profit,
absolutely,
nonprofit, doesn't matter, including governments,
because it's
right? You can
people.
only move as fast. Exactly. And we have, how do you see in the time that span that you've had with all the different mergers and acquisitions and the transitions and the individual growth that you've witnessed, how do you see the transition from the old paradigm into the new paradigm? Is it happening at a momentum building? Is it still slow? Do you see a drastic increase, or even an increase at all, or has it been kind of steady in the growth of understanding?
I think the momentum is slow, to be honest,
Hmm.
in a lot of areas. Where I see it picking up pace is in the small to mid-sized market, where companies are recognizing the fact that things like having this global pandemic where all of their staff worked from home, and they were at least as productive, in some
Oh
industries,
yeah. So,
way
oh my
more
God,
productive.
productivity rates are gonna, plummet. And you did
No,
just the
we
opposite.
we treated people like adults. And suddenly, if they needed a 15-minute break to clear their thoughts in between meetings, they took it and they were more effective in their meetings and they got more things done. And I see that momentum in small to mid-sized spaces really
Hmm.
growing. I think that the 800-pound gorillas, the great big companies, are always going to be slower to move until they recognize the
More
fact
people.
that, yeah, absolutely, that movement has to happen.
Yeah.
Now, even at that level, one of the things that I see that it just does my heart good finally is we're starting to recognize the fact that having women in the C-suite makes our culture more stable. If we're public, it makes our stock more stable. It does a lot of things for us as companies. And so we're starting to move in the right direction. I think
Sure.
we have a long ways to go.
Well,
I
and
really do.
emotional intelligence is more feminine energy based. It's feeling, it's understanding, it's
Absolutely.
compassion, it's kindness. You don't see that from guys, right? Or
Absolutely.
haven't.
And well, that's haven't. It's not that it doesn't exist. It just
Right.
hasn't been acceptable. I one of the things that I've been working with somebody this last year on is talking to their staff about emotions. They had a team member die. They had
Mm.
somebody on a project who unexpectedly had to leave, and then they found out that this person had been doing a great job in one area and doing nothing else. And so there were pretty catastrophic financial consequences.
Mm.
And so he was very, very tactical, but a huge amount of change management deals with not the tactical. And so one of the tools that I love to bring into every change opportunity, and I talk about it with my ops clients a lot, is Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, because there is a change management model built around that
Sure, you
that
have it.
really talks about moving employees through each one of those stages. And when you recognize that, then you can work with it and it can be
Sure.
part of how you do business, and change is easier.
An example of that grief coming back is people wanting to go back to the normal prior to COVID. Can't go back. Got to move forward. So that grief in letting go of the way things were, of, having the office job, of being in the office, 40 hours a week. Now it's not happening. Maybe there's 40 hours at home. Maybe you're a hybrid worker and you're half in the office, half at home. Whatever that is, it's a change from how it was. And we're finding that that agility that companies, organizations, and people themselves have allows that process to happen more effectively. Now, the leadership, again, is really the core driver in that, where there's this move toward serving a greater purpose, right? Beyond the selling the widgets. How do we affect our community? How do we affect the environment that we're in? Does our manufacturing process add to or take away from clean air? Right? Those kinds of things, where it began to come up in, decades past, now is becoming even more critical with the whole aspect of climate change and the perspective that many have on it, that we're a major contributor to it. I'm not sure we are. I know we are a contributor, but we're also going through some polar shifts, and the electromagnetic field is changing, and so our weather patterns and our climate and our even terrestrial, our terrain, earthquakes changing. And so there's this other aspect that's happening too. How do you see the general consensus of dealing with these B Corp missions and visions, and having part of the community as and service, community service as part of the mission and vision? Do you see that on the increase as well?
I do. And I think in the mid-sized space, one of the things that I see is they're doing it for that connected community sense that you're talking about, which I fully embrace. In all honesty, at the large company space, I think some are doing it because they feel they have to, because it's an obligation. And frankly, I I'm okay with that, really, right?
To some
It's still
degree,
getting done.
yeah.
Yeah, it's getting done. But I applaud in the mid-sized space, because if you have fewer resources and you use some of them to enrich in your community, that says more about the level of connectedness and alignment you feel with that community than if you have a lot of resources and you use a very small amount to do good works in the community. And so I see what's happening with the mid-sized space to be the most profound,
Hmm.
because big business is not the backbone of this country.
No,
Small to mid-sized business is. And so small to mid-sized business is really enacting change in their communities, then that's where I believe you see hope, and you see difference, and you see interconnectedness in a way you never have before. And I see that on the growth. I really do.
I do too. And it's always nice to have the reflection. Now, John Hewitt would have a different view on that. Liberty Tax was his organization, huge $1 billion tax service company. I had asked him what he sees in, or if he sees a growth in consciousness and a relative shift in customer service. He said, it's getting worse. So there's that aspect of it that's still, and maybe it's because of, this unknowing or not knowing what to do, or not understanding the other, not being concerned about how the emotional intelligence is used in the customer service regime. But the regime, customer service delivery, because there is this, and I've experienced there's almost a pushback from customer service agents instead of customer's always right. I remember that phrase, and I know you do too. I
Oh,
mean, we
absolutely.
got that growing up. Well, what has changed in that, and how can we invite a shift? Because you can't push it through. There has to be the recognition that, oh, business suffers because of our poor customer service. What could we do? Are we cutting budgets so we can ship our customer service overseas and pay them much less? Well, what effect is that going to have on our core business as a result if people aren't happy? How do you
So
see that being navigated
I
through?
a couple of things with this one too. First off, I think you have to look at what are you defining as customer service? Is it happy customers? Is it returning revenue? Is it revenue? Is it stock price? Is it purely EBITDA? How do you define your customer service? Are you doing surveys and then benchmarking based on those? And I'm going to tell you, I think on some level, almost all of those things can be crap. And here's why. You're not surveying every single one of your customers, right? So the reality is that you have to look at the ebb and flow of this. And right now, we are in a place where people are exhausted. They
Hmm.
are lonely and they are tired of being asked for things that they don't have power to do in companies in which they don't feel they're adequately compensated.
And they're
Now,
tired of going through the telephonic matrix just trying to get to a human being.
absolutely. So
And even
with
that
that,
human being may not be able to answer the questions because they haven't been
often they
trained
can't.
well enough.
Or they don't have access to it.
Yeah.
They're gatekeeping for the initial first couple of rounds of information. So, with all
Yeah.
of that set aside, where do I think that we're going to go with some of this stuff? I I think that you're going to see mid to large size businesses lean heavily into AI for that very first level and let people who can really innovate and do different things stop handling those minutia items that are frustrating, that are exhausting, and that are soul crushing to someone who has
Hmm.
to do it all day, every day.
Well, AI is being used to some degree now with the chat bots and the questions, the answers, and based on what your answers are, they'll send you different directions, give you files to read,
Mhm.
departments that connect to. It's still I mean, this just has begun, right? It's still in its infancy, and we
Absolutely.
expect this to all of a sudden act like human beings. Well, we're not quite there yet.
It's not
However, there's
magic.
been a dramatic increase.
Absolutely. I think companies are recognizing it.
Hmm.
I run
Now, will
a
people embrace it? That's the question, because a lot of the blowback today is that people are afraid of AI, right? And yet here's some very simple ways where it is beneficial and it's non-destructive and it can actually lead you to being served.
I I think that, there's this global fear of Skynet, right? We all saw those movies. So yes. But on the other hand, when you ask actual employees, which is, what we've done with some of our clients, what are the mundane tasks that keep you from being able to really do the most powerful things in your job? Many of those mundane tasks are things that can be handed off
Hmm.
to an AI function. And we're seeing that pan out. I am a chapter head for a global invite only networking organization. And in my chapter, I have somebody who does a lot of specialized AI automation in this arena. And what he's finding really does illustrate this. It shows that companies that are allowing the employees to have input, again, servant leadership, right? We're all
Hmm.
connected.
Right.
Letting them have the input into the types of things they hand off is ultimately providing what they really want, customer
It's a
service.
win-win. Everybody
Absolutely.
is happy
Yeah.
that way. Stuff gets done. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the good stuff is done by the employees who want to be doing it versus the sorting through old files, trying to find an invoice number or things like that that can be done by an indexing system.
Yep. Provided the data entry as well is done appropriately.
Well, always. Yeah, there are caveats.
Right.
Absolutely, Zen. There's
Well,
always a caveat.
and even with that caveat, I know that you can take a spreadsheet, you were talking about, a picture of it. And with the use of AI, you can take the data out of that spreadsheet and it'll create an Excel spreadsheet that's in perfect order. It just takes a little bit of nudging and, we're all learning this in the process. However, it's happening. So even those mistakes, I used to have the OCR, right? And being able to then correlate that data and plug it into files. And now that's taking a new turn. It's like a new chapter in the book of data management. And it's,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Data management is going to go in directions it's never gone before because people who used to have to do massive amounts of classifying and indexing data
Mhm.
can now simply be doing the analysis, forecasting, and visioning of the data because they have different tools at their disposal. I see the prospects for this in business to do nothing but net good customer service because it
Absolutely.
gets people into a place where their innovation and their human capability is maximized and the things that wear on their soul right now are minimized.
Hmm. So let's get into the minutia a little bit and all the details and things within the organizations and the delineation of tasks and information and understanding. And do you feel that it's appropriate to have the transparency of the inner workings and the ability to share that with the lowest level employees so that everybody has a chance to understand the big picture better? Because we were in Sedona the other day, we're driving past a traffic light, and it was small, but it was a big project when it got done. It was one of my partnering jobs, and we were talking about the cost of it, and there was like, I can't believe it. Well, when you think about all the excavation, the different types of cabling and conduit and street repair, and then the building of the stanchions that hold the lights and all of the different elements and pieces, and each one of those is managed by a separate vendor in most cases. So you've got these kind of stacked dimensions, but it's stacked costs that build up that. Now, would that kind of understanding from an organizational standpoint be better to have in order to mitigate overspending or even initiate value engineering or something of that nature?
Yes, I am a huge fan of really deep corporate communication. I think the reality is that in almost any company, the people who know the most about what's going on sometimes are actually the people who are in the weeds with the money spending, right? And that those are not generally decision makers, those are not members of the leadership team. Well, if they already know anyway, then why not provide them with the lens to understand so that their input when it comes up is really grounded in something and not just based on what may be a poor vector because they don't have all the data. Now,
Mhm.
with that said, I don't believe in this whole like just pour it down the funnel, right? I think you have to throttle it a little bit. It has to be
Absolutely. Well, it
available.
has to make sense in how you deliver
Absolutely.
that information, who needs what, and how deep you need to go in the explanation of it for them to grok it, have that
Absolutely.
basic
We're
understanding of it.
huge advocates for having a corporate communication plan that is not simply just about an implementation, an acquisition, or a new product. that it is about your ongoing maintenance of your relationship with your employees. And what that looks like often depends a great deal on what the organization looks like and the size of the organization. If we're doing something with an organization that's got 50 people in it, some of your corporate communication plan really should be that your leaders are out talking to everybody on a
Right.
regular basis. If you've got 50,000
MBWA,
employees,
right?
yep, management by walking
Management by
around.
walking around,
Absolutely.
for those who don't know that acronym.
Yes, absolutely. If you've got 50,000 employees, I still think there's a component of that that should happen, but it's structured and it's planned because you want to maximize your throughput
Well, that's
of
delegated to
information.
the
Mhm.
operational managers, right? And
Absolutely.
leaders within that to have that same responsibility, to know what's going on with their people. Now, how deep do you want to
Absolutely.
know? How much is necessary to know about the people in order to serve them best in the workplace? Because you're going to bring your home life. We don't separate things. Our lives are our lives. They're one life, and those things impact how we work and when we work sometimes, but definitely the productivity rates that we have.
Absolutely. Well, and I have a client right now, and they separate every communication message that goes anywhere in the entire enterprise into client secure, meaning their external clients,
Hmm.
internal secure, and general information. And general information is available at any time to anybody, anywhere within the organization. So if you are working on XYZ project and you don't understand how something fits together, you can access the information yourself. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean every employee will, but the
Sure.
availability of information is key
Yeah, not
in a lot of
everybody needs it.
organizations.
It's
That's right.
it goes from a need to know basis to, availability and a wanting to know basis of which it's then accessible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's again interconnectedness, right?
Hmm. There was a question I had that just vanished. In the aspect of bringing this to people and serving them, how is it, how do you see the development of this core culture? Because in the past, it was simply external customers. The internal customers weren't even seen, let alone realize that, oh, we better serve our internal customers, which are the employees, or we're not going to have the external ones.
Well, here's the go one step further, Zen. Not only were they not seen, I think in some companies they didn't exist yet, right? No one had identified them. They didn't matter. It almost was the reverse of a funnel, right? Here's us at the top, and this is our customer base. And so, for the first time ever, companies are really starting to recognize the fact that if we want this interconnected matrix, right? If our spider web, I love the web mapping methodologies that we can
Mhm.
use for organizations. If our spider web is connected on every level, then every single person inside is really part of our client base, and then they have clients. And so now, not only are we connected to our clients and our staff is connected to our clients and they're connected to us. And that is functionally, it's technically, and oftentimes in business now, especially in the mid-sized space, it's
Mhm.
personally. People build real relationships with their clients and they spend quality time with them and they serve them in a different way than they ever have before.
Sure. It's no longer sales, it's relationship management.
Absolutely. And even in the operations world,
Hmm.
right? We recognize the fact that someone like me, I could run $100 million P&L, but I don't necessarily think I should. I am better suited to be wide in an organization and bring people in who have really great depth because it's about collaboration.
Well, this is Ron Reagan, right? Hire people smarter than you and turn them loose. Paraphrase, but that's basically what happens. You define the
Absolutely.
skill sets necessary, and first of all, you find if it's a cultural fit, they have the innovative attitude, the creative attitude, because again, you've already got skill sets, and are they aptitude compatible? Because that's going to make the biggest difference, because you can't change unless they're willing, right? But
Right. Absolutely.
you're having a, you're having a raw moment in being able to ascertain whether an individual, especially in the hiring process, is going to fit your needs, whether it's a cultural skill set and organizationally compatible mindset, mind flow, if you will, that can grow with the organization, or whether they're, this is how I was trained, this is what I'm going to do, this is all I know. How do you
You know,
deal with that? Because I'm sure that does
it,
happen.
it happens a lot. And honestly, I think what you see is business addressing that right now in this space with how we're shifting how we hire. For the first time, employees are being asked things about their personal mission, vision, values, and goals.
Hmm.
In business, we didn't used to care about those things,
Right.
or at least that was the perception. Now, the reality is
Well, the
if
command
this
and
is
control stuff, you don't need to.
nope, I tell you what to do and you go, you salute and you go do it.
Yep.
The reality now is if my corporate mission, vision, values, and goals are set up in a way that your personal mission, vision, values, and goals are in alignment, then we automatically have alignment, which means we can do more together. If
Yep.
they are opposed, then because we don't have alignment, we have to take so much longer to build trust and to create alignment and to generate the motion in the right direction. Now, I'm not saying that I don't think there are times that the right thing is to hire somebody that isn't in alignment with you. But if you go in knowing it, then what you build is far more effective and far better acknowledges the individual than when you discount it. And we are absolutely starting to see that in hiring.
Oh, that's it's a great progress, and hopefully this will evolve into something that sweeps industry, because we need it applied on a global scale. Now,
We do.
speaking of global, we're just about out of time. I want to draw one more tasty tidbit out of you in the advice that you feel is most pertinent for individuals to step into this new normal. I'll just call it that, because I think that's really what we're after.
I think it's important for people to start leaning in. So often we have very carefully leaned out from things we were uncertain of. And for the first time ever, if we can lean in, we'll create greater connection, greater alignment, and build faster trust in all the things that we're doing, which benefits us as people and benefits every endeavor that we're doing, including business.
Short, sweet. That was powerful,
Thank you.
really powerful, and make the uncomfortable comfortable. Right. That's why
Absolutely.
Young says, make the unconscious conscious. It's the same process
It
with,
is. It absolutely is.
yeah. Cool. Sam, this has been wonderful. Time has gone by way too quick. We're going to have more probably off, not recorded this time, but definitely I look forward to having more conversations. And thank you so much for your time, your effort, and your expertise, and the love that you share for what you do.
It was my pleasure then. The opportunity to learn and grow within this forum is one I know I'm going to enjoy, and I look forward to continuing to develop our conversations because I see that's what they are, a conversation.
Yeah. And conversations can solve pretty much anything when we're willing to have them.
Definitely.
Cool. Thanks so much. Namaste and in cats. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and thank you to Sam Aarons for being part of our show this week. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.